the revenue doesn't buy you the holidays, and the revenue doesn't buy you the home and cars that you might want. It's the profit. As much as you get focused on the revenue, it's important that you also focus on the profit side, because that's what gives you the freedom to do the things you want, is the profit in the bank.
Today, we've got the pleasure of having Mark join us. Mark and I have had a bit of a working relationship for the last few years. Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And I'm looking forward to getting as much wisdom out of you for our listeners as possible. So, Mark, you've had quite an interesting story, chiropractor, e-com seller. Now you've got this great business, SellerVue. Give us a bit of a background on how you went on this kind of mad journey from one extreme to the place you are at now.
Yeah, I was remember seeing patients, and I got this ad on Facebook about how to sell on Amazon back in 2012, and I hopped on a webinar, bought the course, and at the time, 2012 or 2013, Amazon was a different game. Sold a couple of products, they took off, sold my practice. Fast forward a couple of years, I sold it, my first e-commerce business, which really kind of highlighted some of the issues in the space around how to be the most profitable you possibly can be, which started me on kind of the SellerVue journey. Started another one, and that's where I was actually fortunate enough to have built a prototype for myself that I was able to track my costs a lot more efficiently, which ended up adding a significant amount of money to my bottom line, which ultimately increased my valuation by a lot more than I would have had to. Also, made the due diligence a lot more seamless than the first go around.
So, Mark, it sounded like both times around, a big part of the exit process, whether it's the due diligence, the valuation, so many people are just running off the revenue numbers and they think they're going to get crazy multiples. But it sounds like your kind of big learning curve right in the exit process was around the cost side. Can you elaborate a bit more about what you mean by costs? Which costs are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to chat about this later, but the first one, which is your landed costs, which is from the factory floor to the warehouse floor. It's the factory invoice, the shipping invoice, customs, duties, whatever else goes into actually getting that landed cost. Tracking these costs, it's time consuming. It's a whole lot of effort that you have to do, that usually gets pushed to the wayside because you're so focused, like you said, driving on revenue, that if you think, I'm just going to drive revenue, then the profit will be there. But what if your margins were a little bit better because your costs were a little more dialed in and your margins went up with your revenue? That's where the spread difference happens, and that's where you capture a lot more profit into your business, or especially into your P&L, which then in terms, creates the valuation side. That's where I think the big discrepancy happening, where I always say there's like we had one client where he was like, like, what does it matter if I'm off by like 20 cents? And I was like, well, what if you sold 100,000 units and there's a 20-cent difference? It's a lot of money. 20 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add it up, it's a big difference. What if it's the other way around, and you're overstating, and you come to due diligence, and your buyer looks and be like, whoa, this isn't right. This doesn't make sense, and all of a sudden your deal implodes because you weren't right. It wasn't accurate, which happens sadly more cases than not, where the deal blows up over what are these perceived numbers.
It's so interesting you say that, because we work with a lot of us talk to a lot of brokers, e-com investment banks, and their number one reason for deals not happening or concluding is the lack of financial data integrity, and it's almost always around the COGS, the product costs being done correctly, right? It's the number one reason, and some of them talk about up to 2/3 of their deals don't complete because of that.
Yeah, I can believe that, because I mean, only from my own experience, where my deal almost fell through, because when you have your business, like, I would say it's very rare that you'd have a business sell a business, do it again. Most people are going to exit maybe once. So you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And if you had known before you get there, man, your life would be so much more simple, and also probably a little bit, faster on the check.
But I really enjoy kind of talking to you, because most people in the industry we talk to are always worried about revenue and new product and revenue and ads, right? And when they get to that, hardly any people are thinking real profit. So it's interesting because you obviously had a personal pain point during your own exit, which has led to this creation of this tool, SellerVue, right? And at the moment, you are a bit of the only show in town. No one else really does this. And at some point, you must have gone, well, everyone else has got to have the same problem. Do you kind of recollect when that moment happened, or when you're speaking to someone else other than yourself who's having the same problem?
Yeah. Because I mean, like I said, I built this for myself, just a bit of an internal tool. I was going through my the other exit, and I gave my new costs to my accountant at the time. I was like, could you run these through A2X and A2X, da 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 da. And he came back with a one line that said, "What did you do?" I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He was like, "Well, you added an extra $78,000 here," and I was like, "Well, this is what I did." And he was like, "Well, because I mean, Then I took that to the broker, and the broker was like, "Well, that's an extra $375 on $375,000 on the valuation." And I said, if I'm doing this, and I felt like I was pretty meticulous because I'd already gone through one. So I was like, had elaborate spreadsheets, and each cost was connected to a Google Doc where they could go to the PDF and see the costs on the PDF. So everything was, it took a lot of effort to do. Like now with SellerVue, it's click, 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 done. It takes less than 5 seconds. But at the time, it's just creating that flow of information. So I thought, if I'm doing this, then actually I had a friend of mine who was doing Amazon as well. I was like, hey, do you mind if I just check some things with you? And it was the same outcome. Granted, like I wouldn't say like, he would probably be, like the 80-20 rule, probably more like the 80%, where he was like tracking it, but not really tracking it. It was like good enough. And he was off by, I think like 50 cents a unit on his stuff. So I did that for him. And then I did another friend of mine. So I checked her books out, and she was always struggling. And she had wildly underestimated her costs. So, by the time I was like, hey, you're actually losing money on these products. These products are good, but these products you're losing money. So, and again, just no idea that was happening with her. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely was like a realization that like it's a real problem.
And it's the same problem for everyone, right? Whether they know it or not. And the big problem is most people I would imagine people only realize it's a problem when they start trying to sell their business. It's so difficult to go back and fix 2 or 3 years of historics when you've got like a 6-week timeline to get a deal done, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's close to impossible, I would say. But also, it's, I think, like nowadays, when we're looking at, and we're going to discuss margins later, but we need to look at all the ways that we can improve margins, and the only real way right now to maintain margins or improve margin would be from supplier to the warehouse. Like every single touch point that happens in that area, that needs to get better. But the only way for that to get better is to know exactly what those numbers are. You can't just go, oh, I want to make this number better, but I actually don't know what the percentage is. You have to have a handle on that number before a change can occur.
And I suppose you can't be tracking it if it's inaccurate, right?
Well, yeah, you can't be tracking it. You're tracking an inaccurate number. I mean, but it's how you do it, really. Like tracking it in the spreadsheet. As good as spreadsheets are, there's going to be a problem at some point. It's fine maybe if you have 1 or 2 SKUs, but if you're getting into this business, it's what like I was saying, like a couple of years ago, 8 years ago, Yeah, you could have a regular job and be selling a couple products on the side, and Amazon deposits, and it's like it's no big deal. But now I think it's more serious. Now it's a real business. You got to put time and attention onto it, and time and attention takes time.
Exactly, right. Look, I'm still kind of getting over the fact that you went from a chiropractor to a seller to SellerVue. It's quite a journey. So it's a bit more unique as so many others, right? But that's the great thing about this kind of industry.
Yeah, I think like you and I have joked as well. I think like if I wasn't going to be a chiropractor, I think I should have
Yeah,
been
look,
an accountant or
you've got more accounting skills than many of the accountants I know, right?
something.
Cool, Mark. It's such a journey, man, and I'm really glad we're able to kind of tap into some of that experience, and hopefully it'll just help others avoid the same mistakes and get proactive with these cost tracking and doing it right with a view towards due diligence and selling the business. It just makes your business run better today as well, right? So, Mark, just focusing on the kind of the crux of what you built SellerVue to do, cost tracking specifically. I've got a lot of time spent in accounting, and oh man, getting landed cost right is an absolute nightmare. And I know even on my kind of experience, I've seen it just being estimated very roughly. You're pointing out that there can be a 15 cents difference, but that adds up, right? Do you want to talk a bit more about the costing?
Yeah. So like we're looking at what I found over the years is the only real way to track your costs is from obviously your supplier to when you received it, right? But in e-commerce, I might already have, say, 5,000 units sitting. Let's just say for Amazon, for example, I have 5,000 units sitting at Amazon, and say each of those would cost me $2. And now I've ordered another 5,000 units, and those are on the way, and those get landed. And say, for example, for some reason those cost me $2.50. Right. So now, what number should I be using in order to track my costs? I know that we're looking at like A2X, like the best would be a weighted average. But at some point, that the other 5,000 are going to be sold out, and I'm going to be left at the 250. But when did I change it, or did I change it? And that's where what happens a lot is there is no real way to track that efficiently. And it's been done on a I would say on a sloppy basis, just because it's impossible, right? So that's what we do at SellerVue is that's what we monitor. We know exactly what your last received cost per unit is on that basis. That gets put into the software, and then say you order again, but then you sell out of those, and those are that's what the number gets tracked. So it's just making sure that you're tracking everything from the supplier to the warehouse floor. When we're looking at those numbers, especially like the factory cost, that's pretty straightforward. But yes, I ordered 10,000 units. That cost me $10,000. It's $1 a unit. Unless I'm doing some kind of negotiating there to make it, to maybe get better terms or better pricing, there's not a whole lot I can do there. Then the shipping part, the logistics of it. Most sellers will go, okay, well, I take the 10,000 units and I put them in a container, and the goods land, and I'll go, okay, well, $10,000 for the container, 10,000 units, it's $1 a piece, but we are kind of forgetting that maybe inside a container is a shoebox full of maybe 1,000 units. And those units don't cost $1 to ship. It's probably more like a cent to ship. And that was one of my biggest realizations in the business I sold before, is how we're calculating, the goods in the container, versus just doing a blanket easy math, magical. I call it magical math because it's a lot easier. But I had these products that were like little stickers, and they came in a box like this, but there were 2,000 units in there, and they were actually a cent to ship from China. So if you're doing it a different way, the margins would be a big difference. So it's making sure you're calculating correctly on the method that you're shipping. And then the other one is the customs and duties. It's the same situation that we see all the time. You get your customs bill, it's $5,000 on 10,000 units. Okay, yeah, it's 50 cents a unit. All right, so now I got my cost at $250. But some of the products inside a container could be a free tariff. Some could be a 25% tariff. Some could be an 8% tariff. So it's really making sure that you're allocating the correct percentage to that product so that you can actually get that right landed cost per unit. So that not only for profitability or exiting, but really to make a good decision. Because in business, it's all about making good decisions, but you can't make a good decision if you don't have the data. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the HS codes, tariffs are a hot topic now. Who knows what's going to happen with the tariffs? So it's really important to just kind of have your finger on the pulse of these things, just so that you're not losing money. I mean, the point of being in business is to make money, to profit, to grow your business. Because I always say to clients, like, if you're so focused on revenue and you aren't focused on profit, you're basically just building yourself an overhead.
I like what you're saying there, because I just want to jump in, because this is my consistent frustration when I talk to sellers, is everyone's so worried about revenue and everything else is an estimate. So, the guys sell more, but they aren't making profits maybe on 2 of the SKUs because they're not running their mass properly, right? And what I keep learning from this talks with you is how important the small margin in terms of cost accuracy versus estimates, how that really affects profit and loss, right? And that gets multiplied when you have an exit, but it's also important for just making decisions on how you run your business this month. Is that a fair kind of statement to make?
Yeah, I'll definitely say that. Because we're in the business, like I said, we're in this business to grow and build a great business, something that is front facing to people that they can buy. But at the end of the day, you want to earn a great living from it. As much as you get focused on the revenue. I think it's important that you also focus on the profit side, because that's, for the lack of a better word, that's what buys you things. Like that's what you take your family on vacations with, and that's what gives you the freedom to do the things you want, is the profit in the bank. The revenue doesn't buy you the holidays, and the revenue doesn't buy you the home and the cars that you might want. It's the profit. So, doing the things on a day-to-day basis to ensure that you're profitable is, I think, what sellers need to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think it's a lot of wisdom that so many people who are gurus in this space don't talk to, right? So many of the sellers we come across and talk to are revenue smart. They know how to generate revenue, but they're profit stupid. They don't think about it. They don't build the skill sets in themselves and the processes in their business to ensure they're profitable early on.
Well, I think, I've been doing this in like 2012, so, I've been through all the webinars, I've seen all the things, and, like there's new shiny objects that come out all the time. And, I hear it a lot is, like the latest PPC trend, or the latest this trend, or the latest this and this. And all those things don't put money back into your business. It's just another way to spend more.
Agreed. And also, what I'm hoping to see stop happening is the guys who are so revenue focused, they're losing money or barely breaking even. And then they're running off and taking out crazy working capital, revenue based loans to fund more inventory. And all they do is they land up making no profits and getting more and more debt until they can never get out of it, right? And all that time, energy, and money just gets wasted. If they had been profitable on day one, had their costs properly tracked, really understood their true profitability, well, they could have had a great business, right? Instead of a couple of $100,000 in debt and no profits.
Yeah, and also I think it depends on where they're selling. I think that the biggest contributor to this is, say, Amazon, is where you put up a product, it kills it, it does great. You have like a nice 6-month run rate before it pops up on one of these scouting tools, and then it's game over from there. So I think it's one of those things where I think you need to look at the data, and if it's a downward trend, Like, do you take that money and reinvest it into something new and just take the possible, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen in 18 months' time. So you're better off kind of halving your order, selling, and taking the split and doing a new product. It's again data centric. You need to look where I think a lot of sellers are like, it's never going to end. This is the best thing ever, and then bam, I think it's that just monitoring, looking at the data, making a good decision for your business. What's the best outcome? I can see this happening here. All right, this is my plan of attack. I think that's more, which I think is happening. I think the marketplace and I think the sellers are becoming a lot more savvy.
I think also there's more people like you, like me. We're starting to talk about profits, not just revenue, right? And I think also the debt environment's changed. So guys can't just keep funding revenue only businesses through lots of cheap or easy capital. It's getting a bit harder. You're not running off and getting an SBA loan for 300 grand at 2% interest and never paying it back, right? So you've got to have a profitable business that makes money now. And if you're going to think about this, I'm also seeing more of the people I talk to are, they'll hit a certain bit of run rate on their Amazon, and then they go, well, this is a profitable product. How can I make it more profitable? Well, now maybe I start launching that as a private label on my own website in Shopify. Or, so if you've got your costing and your profits done, you can think about investing in other products, but also other sales channels, other geographies, etc. Right?
Yeah. I agree. I think, at the end of the day, when I think about, scaling sales profitably, if you step back and look and be like, what's the best, outcome? Most people will go, just turn on the PPC and off you go. Where I would probably say, pump the brakes on that and start off with more of like a strategy on, profit recovery. Am I maxing my margins on every product I sell? Is it the best outcome? Can it be better? Can I negotiate with my supplier? Can I get better shipping rates? Are my customs and duties correct? Are there anywhere else I can get money back from UPS or FedEx or wherever it might be? Is that the best? Okay, great. It's the best. Next, I look at my business and go, are my business processes well enough to handle the increase in scale? Is my inventory management tools correct? Are my listings good? Are my pictures good? Is this and then I go, okay, let's scale sales. Let's go. Whether I'm scaling sales through PPC or am I scaling sales in other marketplaces, am I expanding? But at the end of the day, I'm fully aware that I'm making as much money on the back end as possible.
What I like about what you're saying, and I just want to keep bashing it in, is you're thinking about making as much money as in profits, right? And if someone just takes one thing away from today's kind of discussion is you got to be thinking profits, which means you got to have your calculations and know your numbers, right? Otherwise, you're wasting your time and you're probably going to just spend a lot of money going nowhere. So, Mark, we've been spending a lot of time talking about costs and profits. One thing I enjoy about our previous discussions and the way you kind of look at performance is this concept of contribution margin. So not just gross profits, right? Which is revenue minus your landed COGS or to get gross profit. But you've got a bit more of a systematic way of thinking about this that's kind of usable and practical. Can you talk us through your contribution margin layout?
Yeah. So when I think about, selling or, being profitable, you got to think about, I would say like the profit pie, right? We've got a pie and, there's percentages of the pie that go to here. So we're looking at the contribution margin, there's three contribution margins. There's 1, 2, and 3, which, contribution margin 1 is, from the supplier to the warehouse floor, like everything in between that cost is calculated in. And then the next one, contribution margin 2, is from the warehouse to the customer, as far as fulfillment goes, storage fees, last mile delivery or anything that kind of sits in there, that goes into number 2. And then number 3 is your ad spend. So if you kind of split those apart, and what I like when I think about the profit pie is you can you can see exactly what is getting taken from each product. So you'll be able to see, okay, the percentage. And when I'm saying this as well, there's two ways to look at it. There's the 30,000 foot view where you can look at your entire business. And then there's on the granular level where you can look at individual SKUs and say, okay, well, this is what I'm making on this product, and maybe there's a trend over time where you can see the profits kind of taking a bit of a nosedive, or maybe it's going up a little bit. But again, it's just having your finger on the pulse to see the changes and make the decisions. So, when I think about the profit pie, that's where you can make the best decisions possible, because you'll be able to exactly see where the holes are. If your landed costs are, for some reason 30%, and Amazon's already up to like 55%, and you're dropping 15% on ads, now, if you have the data, you can go in and look, be like, okay, why is this 30%? Oh, okay, well, customs is high, and like my logistics is high. I am maybe shipping things by air maybe a little bit more because my process of inventory control isn't amazing. So maybe I need to fix that, and maybe go a little more, order a little bit ahead in time and put my product in containers. But again, if you don't know this information, you're just now left wondering, why are my margins so bad? So breaking up your sales into contribution margin 1, 2, and 3 gives you the ability to kind of see trends over time.
And when you're talking about this pie, so I've got a picture of a pie in my mind, which is, the total pie could be a dollar value, or it could be 100%, i.e. the revenue, right? Do you like to think about this? If you're thinking about this across different companies, is it useful to convert this all to a percentage? So, contribution margin 1, which is all the, inbound costs to get to your warehouse, that's a percentage of revenue, right? Is that the way you think about it when you're doing analysis over time or between companies?
Yeah, that percentage is, I would say, the most usable information, because if I have 100% and I only have 8% left, I think in our brains it like makes a lot more sense. If I'm selling at 120,000 and the landed cost is 27,000, it's kind of hard to compute. But if I had quickly looked, 120, that 20, maybe just less than 30% or something. It's a lot easier to make a quick decision, looking at a percentage versus a whole number.
I think that's a really useful way. If you want that 30,000 kind of view of your business, to have that picture maybe for the total business per SKU, like you said. I also could envision doing that per sales channel, right? So if you're a Amazon, you've got your own website and you sell on Walmart, you can have a look at per sales channel as well, right? Especially if you're not a numbers guy, right?
I think in business, it's good to obviously have a handle on your numbers, but I think it's more important for a business person to have the tools, like what you guys do and what we do, running in the background, so that you can focus on more important things. Which coming back to revenue, like if the business owner is driving revenue, and you got like you and I, handling the profit on the side, recipe for success. But I would say, it's hard to do both. When you're starting out, it's a little bit harder to, bring it all around. But there's a certain point where I think it makes a lot of sense just to go, you know what, this isn't my forte. I'm gonna go over here and have these guys do it, because at the end of the day, and I say this to everyone, at the end of the day, you, me, we all pay for ourselves, if not more. If I find you 5%, and you say you paid me, $5,000, and I make you an extra 50, your bump was $45,000.
I think it's important, because a lot of sellers that I meet feel that they're not enough. They're supposed to be able to read these big income statements and these big data analytics. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about You need a system that's getting all that data correct and then giving you a very simple graphical representation that you can make decisions on. Yes, as the owner, you need to make sure that you've got the experts and the systems in place to make sure that those numbers are accurate, because rubbish in, rubbish out, right? If you're getting these beautiful graphs and all the costs are wrong, well, they're pointless, right? But with tools like SellerVue and different e-commerce accountants who do this job really well, a good inventory system, if you're getting that data in, then it's about distilling it down to the most basic way. And that's what I really like about this 3 contribution margins, right? Put it as a percentage, do it per sales channel. It helps you. You can look at it in one slide, one screen every month. And if you're doing it as a percentage, you can compare against like a benchmark. Like you want your advertising spend to be 15% or 20%. Oh, well, you were over, you were under, you got a KPI now, right? And you can compare it over time. So if you're looking at last year, the business might have been 30% smaller, or the business was doing 200,000 a month last year. Now it's doing $1 million. Well, let's just look at what the percentage of the total revenue was to see that we are still profitable. So I really like that layout. I think that's something we should really try and push on to everyone who's working in this space. Think about it with the 3 profit contributions.
Yeah, well, just if you know them, that's where you make the best changes. Granted, if you're looking at the 3 margin, well, the 3 contribution margins, it's especially like number 2, which is from the warehouse to the customer. There's not a whole lot you can do there. You can manage your storage better. You could be a lot more efficient with how you ship things, say to Amazon, for example, as their fees go up. But there's not a whole lot. It's not like you can call Amazon and be like, I would like a better rate. And now, and also with PPC, it's pay to play. Now it's no longer, you rank and you're on page 1 and you stay there. It's continual, pay to play. So, advertising has gone up. So the only real way to maintain profitability is the first one. And if you know that first one, and how do you make that better? I would say your contribution margin 1 is more of a quote unquote a free market, where you're still going to someone, your supplier, you still have a connection with that supplier. You can form a bond. You can you can negotiate a little bit better. Maybe you get better terms over time. You can still do those things. And also logistics. You can have a better relationship with your freight forwarders. In fact, you should probably have a relationship with a couple of freight forwarders to get the rates, because there are a number of really good ones, and the guys that we work with are really good. And I always joke with them. I'm like, I'm going to recommend a couple, because you might be say $5,000 for a container, and the other one might be $4,600, and you're both really good, but that's $400 back in the seller's pocket. Like things like that, they add up.
They really do, and so it opens up. If you can identify which of those contribution margins you're off on, right? Like that percentage is too big. It gives you focus, right? So it might be your ads. Maybe PPC is just not working on Amazon for you, so you got to go off platform, and you got to figure out influencers or something else, right? If it's your inbound shipping, you've been hit with huge tariffs. What else are you going to do? Do you need to change your supplier location? I agree with you. I just love the fact that it helps you focus on the important thing. So I think sellers get so overwhelmed by the numbers that it's like, I've seen sellers getting panicky around something that's 0.5% of their revenue because they think they can change this fee on this app. Like that number doesn't matter. What's the most important number is contribution margin 2 or 1 or 3 for you and your business, right?
Well, it also comes back down to even these 3 contributions. Say you're at $1 million in revenue a year, and you just do 1% better, just 1% better. I mean, that's $10,000. It's $10,000. You just did something a little bit better. Because even if you drove up your revenue, you still if you didn't do anything, you still had a 1% loss. So. Even if you took 1% of ad spend, could you do 1%? I mean, that's what I also think as well is with your ad spend. What if you just lowered it by just a little bit and see what happened? Would it make an impact? Possibly. Definitely make an impact to your profitability. But monitoring the fact that does it impact on your sales, that would be something that you'll have to look at. But again, with 1% on ad spend, and if you only did that, that's $10,000 extra dollars, back in your pocket. That's you're possibly sourcing new products or whatever it might be. But it's 10,000 more that you didn't have before.
And you got so many different opportunities to really. It's almost like a lever. It's like a profit lever, right? So you tug this by 1%, and you almost got the opposite end extended out, giving you a 10% change over time, right? I saw one of our the people we've worked with. They were shipping in a certain region so much, but their warehouse was in a different shipping zone. They literally moved their 3PL warehouse 10 miles up the road, got into the shipping zone where most of their sales were happening, and they brought down their shipping cost monthly by like $100,000 a month. It's the craziest things. But to be talking a dollar a shipment kind of change, but it adds up when you got volume. But you got to measure, right? You got to measure this month versus next month when you've made that change. If you're not measuring it, you're getting it wrong. But what's interesting, and I'm just bringing us back to the COGS, the product cost. You talk about all the costs to get to the warehouse. That number is the number that I see people getting wrong the most. Like ad spend is ad spend, right? You've got that data. It's not really something you're going to get wrong on a huge basis. But the COGS, the cost per landed product in your warehouse, man, that's not easy to get right. And that's the one that I see the biggest value shift just by getting the measurement right. And so I really like the way you put the time and effort into that, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously prior, there's a lot of tools out there, but they also, it's like the easiest one is the factory. Invoice goes out, okay, fine, it's $1 a unit. Where the biggest issue comes in is calculating the freight and calculating the customs. I actually have not come across one client as much as they, they're like, oh no, they're right. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. We'll take a little friendly wager. Invariably, they all, are definitely wrong. They're all wrong. Not one client has come back and be like, oh, all right, you're spot on. But again, no fault to the seller. There's no, prior to, what we can do, there's no real solution out there that actually calculate this in a way that's effortless. Because it comes back to time and effort. If I'm going to spend on a Monday all day trying to figure out my costs, and then I get them to you, and then a week later, a whole new container arrives, and then I'm like, okay, I got to do this again, and now it must, it's just it's never ending. So, which is why, as a seller, it's finding those solutions to support you and finding the people to support you so that you can get back to doing the things that you love to grow your business. Well, the efficiency and the numbers things are kind of done, for you.
Yeah, I think it's so important to understand where you as the business owner add the most value, right? So that's on strategy. If you're in e-com, you're probably most valuable at driving revenue, right? That's kind of how you built the business in the first place. But at some point, someone's got to get down and do these costs properly. And the other thing I like about not just the accuracy, because, oh man, I've lived in spreadsheets. I've worked with 40, 50 sellers that are at scale. Doesn't matter if they've got NetSuite, like something's happening in a spreadsheet to calculate landed cost and customs, which means human error, right? Human error is in there, huge amounts of time. And then also the third thing comes in is when those businesses go to an exit, the seller comes along and goes, cool, show me all your process and the how you did this for the last 2 years. Then you got to go find your damn spreadsheets. And then the seller looks at the first two, and those are the two that you made the errors in. So now they don't trust your COGS, and then they drop your value by 20%, right? So having a systematic, clean way of doing this is really useful. And what I do want to also note is that most inventory systems, I'm not going to name them, but they all do the same thing. They're very good at managing purchase orders, i.e. from the manufacturer bill, but there's usually one little number which you manually put in for the shipping and customs. The inventory system is not helping you calculate that, it's giving you a reasonable basis always, especially with customs. If you've got 100 products on there and 5 different HS codes, good luck doing that in a spreadsheet, right? And those numbers can be significant when you've got 10,000 units a month being sold.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the big one. Yeah, the big one where we see the biggest, one is obviously the freight, calculating the freight correctly. But then it is the customs, because you look at the customs bill. There's sometimes multiple percentages on there. There's a 7%, then there's a 12%, and then there's a harbor tariff, and then for some reason there could be like a cotton tariff. All this, and on the entry bill, you might have ordered 20 different products, but they're all consolidated into maybe 5 HS codes. So that's the other thing, is making sure that even though if they're grouped, that it makes sense. Because I could have a large percentage of the goods on the customs bill where there should be like a 10% tariff or something, on 7%, but because they're grouped, they're a 12% tariff. So it's really identifying these areas of it's identifying these areas and ensuring that there's accuracy in what you're paying, so that money comes back to you, or that profit comes back to you.
Mark, we're going to try and include some fast fire wisdom at the end of our end of every episode. So I've got 4 quick questions. Shoot off the first thing that comes to your mind. What's the biggest mistake you made as a seller?
Biggest mistake I would say is not outsourcing quick enough. Is knowing the things that I'm good at and outsourcing the rest.
Yeah, I think that's a common one. Cool. The next one. What's your favorite book, course, or quote that you would love to share with everyone?
Yeah, I would love to say I'm a big reader, but with working kids, that's kind of gone by the wayside. So I would say I really enjoy just reading all rugby books, sports books.
So like a true South African, I can relate. Random one, but do you classify yourself more as a thinker or as a doer?
I would say more of a doer, but also like to plan and think about the actions before doing, not just jumping head first. So I would say both, actually. Think, plan, and then do.
From the interactions I've had, I'd also say you're kind of a think as you go kind of guy. You don't you get things done, right? So every time we speak, next time you really started doing, I'm still in the planning board talking with 3 other people, and you've really done the first 3 steps. So I think you think while you do, which is quite an interesting combination. It's quite a rare one, to be honest. How do you make decisions? Do you have a framework or a set of principles that help you make decisions in business, in life, in family?
Well, yeah, in business, I'm probably say more data driven. I like to look at the metrics, the KPIs of the business, and then plan on action steps to improve metrics. So decisions, I would say more data driven. I would say even since I wouldn't say I was possibly like that before, but actually even when I had the Cairo business, I was managing the office with statistics and seeing certain trends that would arise, and then planning around that. So I would say the framework would be collecting the data, having a look at it, and then planning and then doing.
Still think you should have somehow landed up in finance, not being a chiropractor. I think a brain was wired to be an accountant somewhere along the line. Cool.
I think so too.
I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. I'm never quite sure. Mark?
I'll take it as a compliment.
The accountants are always thinking that the data is one aspect, but I think the person who can use the data in real world situations with people gets things done, right? And again, evidence speaks for itself. Having built a chiropractic business, 2 seller businesses, and now SellerVue, I think you got both sides pretty well covered.
Awesome.
Cool. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, wisdom, and I always learn from our talks. I just really want to take a second for people to figure out, for you to tell people, where can I get hold of SellerVue and what's the best way about getting to know the product and using it?
Yeah, the best thing is to go to the website, sellervue.com. I would probably encourage people to book a demo. We're going to hop on a call and we can do a free audit of your business, especially that contribution margin one, to kind of see exactly where you're sitting in terms of the 30,000 foot view, and then from there we can take it from there. So just pop over to SellerVue and just book some time.
Cool. We'll stick a link in the information below. And guys, I use it for the businesses I work in and work on. We love the product. It just beats the pants off of the damn spreadsheets we used to live in. So have a look. And Mark, thanks again for the time. Thanks everyone for joining us on the Ecom Profit Guide. Hopefully you've learned some lessons and leads to more profits. We'll see you next time. Thanks.